My name is Marissa Hale, and the moment I discovered my parents were 90 days away from losing their home, I didn't feel shock, I felt recognition. Because the name on the foreclosure paperwork wasn't theirs, it was mine. 4 years earlier, they had looked me in the eye and told me I didn't deserve help after refusing me a $5,000 loan that could have launched my business, then turned around and handed my sister $90,000 without hesitation or questions. I didn't know it then, but that painful no would become the fuel that built a $47 million company, the same company that now legally owned the loan they gambled their future on. And the day I walked into my conference room and found my sister sitting there, applying for a job with a resume full of lies, I realized my family had finally stepped into my world, where truth has receipts and consequences arrive on time. Before we go any further, make sure you subscribe to the channel and tell me where you're watching from. If you've ever walked into a place convinced your whole life might finally shift, only to walk out feeling like the universe just shrugged at you, then you already understand the kind of morning I had the day all of this began. I sat in a bank lobby that smelled like stale printer ink and resignation, gripping my business plan so tightly the edges curled against my palms. When the loan officer called my name, Marissa Hale, she skimmed my folder with the detached politeness of someone scrolling past an ad they've seen 100 times. "Your plan is very ambitious," she said, which I knew was professional code for delusional. She didn't read my research, my projections, or the blueprint I'd built line by line over sleepless nights. She simply asked for collateral I didn't have, a cosigner I didn't want to ask for, and guarantees my life had never given me. Then she nudged the folder back toward me like it carried something contagious. "Without those, we can't approve even a basic $5,000 loan." $5,000, less than people casually spent on weekend flights or wedding deposits, was now the wall between me and every plan I'd dared to imagine. I walked out with a rejection slip and sat in my car staring at my reflection, the tired-eyed version of myself I hated seeing. I swallowed the shame rising in my throat, pulled out my phone, and pressed the one number I'd been avoiding all week. "Mom," I said when she answered, "can I come by tonight? I need some advice." What I didn't say, what I couldn't say, echoed louder in my chest than the words I spoke. "I need help, and I'm terrified you're going to tell me I don't deserve it." I reached my parents' house that evening with my rejection slip still folded in my pocket like a bruise I didn't know how to show, arriving early because anxious people always do, and sat in the driveway pretending to scroll my phone until the clock hit 6:30. When Mom opened the door, she gave me that warm but confused smile she reserves just for me, like she's still surprised I exist outside the periphery of our family. Dad barely glanced away from the TV, offering a distracted nod as I sat on the couch and placed my business plan on the coffee table as gently as if it might shatter. I explained everything, my idea, the potential clients, the numbers I'd memorized, the tiny loan I needed to get started, and waited for them to see what I saw. Instead, Dad didn't even open the folder before saying, "We're not giving you money," and Mom added the sentence that carved itself into my bones, "You don't deserve help, Marissa." I was still swallowing those words when the front door flew open and my younger sister, bright and golden and permanently adored, burst inside squealing that she'd been accepted into the Paris Fashion Institute. In seconds the living room erupted, hugs, tears, pride, and when Dad asked the cost and she shyly said about $90,000 total, he didn't hesitate. He pulled out his checkbook right there, writing a $45,000 check on the spot and promising the rest without blinking. I stood frozen in the doorway, watching the same parents who told me I wasn't worth a $5,000 loan hand my sister a future worth 90 grand, no questions, no plan, no projections, just yes. And as they smothered her in congratulations, I realized something with a clarity that stung. I had never been their investment. I had only ever been their afterthought. The morning after watching my parents write a $45,000 check like it was nothing more than a grocery receipt, I took my business plan and my bruised pride to a co-working space downtown, a place that smelled like burnt espresso, old carpet, and desperate ambition. I paid $12 for a day pass, because that's what starting over costs when you have nothing but belief, and found a wobbly table near the window where the sunlight made even failure look softer. I had barely opened my laptop when a woman in an oversized purple hoodie and tattooed forearms glanced at me over her screen and said, "You've been staring at that document for 20 minutes without scrolling. Existential crisis or writer's block. I laughed for the first time in days, told her my name Marissa, and learned hers was Van, a graphic designer living on caffeine and unpaid invoices. Moments later, an older man with a frayed cardigan and a kind, tired face paused by our table, asked what I was building, and introduced himself as Derek, ex-investment banker, emphasis on ex. He asked to read my plan, and unlike the loan officer or my own parents, he actually did, page by page, question by question. When he finished, he closed the folder and said, "I'll give you $3,000, not a loan, an investment, 2% equity." Van chimed in without missing a beat, "And I'll do $2,500 worth of design work for another 2%. Before I could even process that kindness, my phone rang, an unknown number. It was Riley, an old college acquaintance turned business lawyer, calling out of nowhere to offer $2,500 in legal work for yet another 2%. In less than an hour, 3 people who barely knew me offered exactly what my own family refused to give. And as I sat there surrounded by strangers who believed in me before anyone else ever did, I realized something profound. Sometimes the people who are meant to stand with you are not the ones who share your blood, but the ones who recognize your fire when everyone else only sees smoke. If someone had told me that the empire I was about to build would grow out of cheap coffee, sleepless nights, and a wobbly table in a co-working space, I would have laughed. But 4 years passed in a blur of grit disguised as hope. Year 1 was survival. Our first client paid $12,000 for analytics that I delivered half from skill and half from sheer stubbornness. And even though we didn't profit, not drowning felt like momentum. Year 2 was the whisper of possibility. Word of mouth spread, revenue climbed past $250,000, and Van became our full-time brand director while Derek morphed into our unofficial pitch man, charming investors with his calm certainty that I was going to make it. Riley handled every contract, every compliance nightmare, every crack in my confidence with the steadiness of someone who knew I was worth betting on. Year 3 brought our first major break, a $3 million Series A round valuing us at $12 million, and I remember staring at the term sheet thinking, my parents wouldn't trust me with $5,000, and now strangers are trusting me with millions. By year 4, we sold a 32% stake for $15 million, pushing the company's valuation to $47 million, and turning the small equity I'd given Van, Derek, and Riley into nearly $1 million each. They cried when they realized it. I cried when I realized they deserved every penny. And when I bought a 6-bedroom mansion for the team to work and live in, I didn't choose the master suite or any of the sleek bedrooms with balconies. I chose the renovated 200-square-foot garden shed behind the pool, a tiny space with fairy lights, a mini fridge, and a desk crammed against the wall. Van teased me, Riley called it tax-efficient insanity, Derek called it CEO performance art, but none of them understood the truth. The mansion was for the people who believed in me when my own family didn't, and the shed was for the version of me who once stood in a bank lobby clutching a rejected loan application, determined to build something out of the pieces no one else thought were worth anything. 6 months after moving into the mansion turned headquarters, I was rewriting workflows in my tiny shed office when my phone rang with an unknown number, one of those crisp, polite calls that usually means paperwork or problems. "This is Jessica from Premier Lending Services," the woman said. "You're listed as the emergency contact for mortgage account 847,392. I opened our internal portal because Premier Lending had been one of the companies we acquired earlier that year, and when I typed in the account number, the world tilted. Borrowers Theodore and Margaret Hale, my parents, past due 90 days, foreclosure 30 days away, and the loan purpose emergency medical expenses, except there had been no medical emergency. Not 3 years ago, not ever. But 3 years ago was exactly when they wrote my sister that $45,000 check, exactly when they promised another $45,000, exactly when they told me I didn't deserve a $5,000 loan. They had mortgaged their house to send her to Paris. They risked their home for her future while telling me mine wasn't worth $5,000. I stared at the screen, chest tightening, realizing I now legally own the loan they never wanted me to see. "Would you like updated borrower contact information?" the representative asked gently. My voice sounded like it came from someone else entirely. "No," I said, "I'll handle it personally." I hung up, hands trembling, not from anger, not from triumph, but from the surreal weight of the truth. My parents were about to lose their home, and the only person who could stop it was the daughter they once told didn't deserve help. I was still processing the shock of discovering I owned my parents' mortgage when HR buzzed my office line with a nervous tremor in her voice. "Marissa, we have a walk-in applicant for the marketing manager position. Her last name is Hale, same as yours." My pulse stuttered. "Send her to the conference room," I said, already knowing, on some instinctive sinking level, exactly who it was. When I stepped inside, my sister sat at the table scrolling her phone with the serene confidence of someone who had never truly been told no. At first, she didn't look up, but when she did, the recognition swept across her face like a storm, confusion, realization, horror. "Marissa," she whispered. What are you doing here?" I gestured to the embossed logo on the wall. "I own this company. Let's talk about your application." I pulled up her resume, and it was almost impressive how thoroughly she had rewritten reality. Paris Fashion Institute graduated, Luxe Brands Marketing Coordinator, Elevate Digital Brand Strategist. I called each one while she watched, trembling. Paris confirmed she'd dropped out after the first year, failing 6 classes. Luxe Brands had never heard of her. Elevate Digital didn't exist anywhere except in her imagination. She started crying before I even said a word. And then mid-interview my father called, his voice sharp, defensive, angry. "What did you say to your sister? She's crying. She told us you're claiming to own a company and a mansion. What is going on?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "She didn't tell you she applied here." Silence. "She didn't tell you her resume is almost entirely fabricated." More silence. Then Mom's voice in the background, brittle and accusing. "Why would we believe you?" That sentence, so familiar, so predictable, settled over me like ice. So I said the words that finally shattered their denial. "Then maybe you'll believe your mortgage statement, because Premier Lending belongs to my company, and I own your loan." The line went dead. My sister sobbed. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one breaking. I walked out of the conference room shaking, not from anger but from the harsh clarity of knowing there was no pretending anymore. Every truth I'd carried alone for years now lay bare on the table for all of us to choke on. Riley found me in my shed office that evening, laptop in hand, eyes sharp. "We need to protect the company," they said, "and you need boundaries." They drafted an ultimatum with the precision of a scalpel. Option A, a full, public apology from my parents and sister, admission of favoritism, admission of lying, and in return I would restructure the loan into manageable payments. Option B, no apology, and foreclosure would proceed exactly as the law allowed. Option C, public exposure. Business Insider, loan documents, Paris Fashion Institute records, every lie dragged into the daylight. They had 48 hours to choose. Before I could breathe, Van burst in, face flushed with fury. She had evidence, screenshots, timestamps, side-by-side comparisons, proving my sister had plagiarized entire design pieces for the portfolio she submitted. "She stole from real creators," Van said. "I'm posting a video, facts only, no drama." I told her to wait, but she wouldn't. "She disrespected our work, our industry, and what we built," she said. At 8:00 p.m., she posted a 2-minute expose so airtight it could suffocate. Within an hour, it had over 12,000 views. Within 2, 87,000. By midnight, 2.1 million. Comments brutal, relentless, deserved. My sister's DMs flooded, her Instagram imploded. She cracked the next morning, uploading a raw video where she admitted everything, dropping out of Paris, the stolen art, the fake jobs, the wasted $90,000. And just when I thought the storm couldn't intensify, my parents posted their own video, stiff and broken, admitting they told me I didn't deserve help and gave everything to the wrong daughter. As the world judged them, Daniel sat me down and asked the question that cut deeper than any betrayal. "Marissa, are you doing this for accountability or for revenge?" And for the first time since this began, I wasn't sure I knew the answer. The next 48 hours felt like living inside a storm I had created but no longer controlled. My sister's tearful confession kept climbing past 4 million views. Design communities were dissecting every stolen pixel of her portfolio. And my parents' apology video spread through the internet like a slow, painful bruise. They sat stiffly on their living room couch, voices trembling as they admitted every truth I spent my whole childhood feeling but never hearing. Yes, they favored my sister. Yes, they dismissed my dreams. Yes, they told me I didn't deserve help while mortgaging their home to fund hers. The comments were a mix of disbelief, rage, sympathy, and judgment, but I didn't feel vindicated. I felt hollow, like I'd opened a wound too deep to close easily. With 13 minutes left on the ultimatum clock, Mom called, her voice fragile, almost childlike. "We choose option A," she whispered. "Please just make this stop." But the internet was a wildfire now, and even I couldn't control it. All I could do was enforce the deal. That night, exhaustion wrapped itself around me like wet cloth until Daniel stepped into the shed, his face gentle, his eyes steady in a way that made me want to collapse into him and disappear. "You're carrying too much alone," he murmured, sitting beside me. "But before any of this continues, you need to know your own truth." He took my hands, thumb brushing my knuckles in slow, grounding circles. "Are you fighting for accountability or trying to hurt them the way they hurt you?" His question cracked something open inside me, not anger, not vengeance, but grief I'd never named. I stared at the floor, tears blurring the fairy lights strung above my desk, and whispered the only answer I could manage. "I think I just wanted them to see me, really see me." He squeezed my hands. "They do now," he said, "but the next step, that's yours." And for the first time in years, I realized I wasn't sure what moving forward was supposed to look like. Only that I couldn't keep walking backward. Life didn't magically soften after the apologies. It simply shifted, like a heavy object being dragged to a different corner of the room. 3 months passed in a slow, uneasy truce as my parents quietly paid their restructured mortgage and my sister rebuilt her life away from the glare of a screen. I threw myself back into the company. Series B funding closed, we hired an engineering team, added new departments, and transformed the basement into a design studio that would have made Van cry if she weren't too busy screaming about fonts. All the while, I worked on something no one knew about. Not my team, not Daniel, definitely not my family. My PhD. The program I started the year my parents said I didn't deserve help. And on graduation day, walking across an auditorium buzzing with proud families, I felt something loosen inside me when I saw the people who mattered. Van in a purple suit holding a glittery "Dr. Hale built this" sign, Riley tapping their phone like they were filming a documentary, Derek straightening his cardigan as if it were couture, and Daniel, who stood up the moment he saw me, eyes full of warmth that softened every hard edge inside my chest. My parents and sister slipped into seats farther back, quiet, humble, unsure of their place. When my name was called, Van's scream echoed through the hall, Riley whistled like a stadium crowd, and Daniel yelled, "That's my girlfriend," louder than anyone else. When I stepped off stage with my diploma, Mom approached first, voice trembling as she said, "We're proud of you," for the first time in my life. Dad added, "A doctorate while running a company." "That's impressive," in a tone that wasn't patronizing, just honest. Claire stood there too, changed, hair simple, makeup minimal, humility replacing the old entitlement. "I saved $8,000, she blurted. "For a real business this time, ethical fashion, no lies, I don't want money, just advice, accountability." I held her gaze, searching for the girl she used to be but finding someone new instead. "Then I'll match your $8,000, I said softly. She gasped. "But not as a gift." 10% equity, you lie once, just once, and I pull out. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "Deal." For the first time, I believed her. And when the company went public a year later, IPO, $200 million valuation, my shares worth $132 million, I celebrated in the mansion with plastic cups, cheap champagne, and the people who had lifted me when my own family tried to clip my wings. My parents came too, quiet, respectful, aware they were guests in a world I built without them. Claire's ethical fashion line launched shortly after, small, honest, real. And for the first time in our lives, we were standing not as rivals or replacements, but as two women starting over from truth instead of illusions. The months that followed didn't erase the past. They simply softened its edges, like a scar that stops aching even though it never fully fades. My family began joining me for monthly dinners, not in the mansion, not in the polished conference rooms or glass offices they once thought I invented to inflate my ego, but in the shed behind the pool, the same 200-square-foot space where I built my future in silence. At first, they arrived stiff and awkward, bringing too much food and too many apologies, as if trying to fix years of hurt with store-bought casseroles and nervous smiles. But slowly, honesty seeped into the tiny room like warmth through cracked windows. Mom always brought flowers, small, humble bouquets she arranged with trembling hands. Dad brought desserts from the bakery down the street, never homemade, as if unsure he deserved to offer something crafted with his own effort. And Claire, she arrived with notebooks filled with sketches, questions, supply chain breakdowns, and late-night doubts written in the margins. She worked harder than I ever expected, not for approval, but for redemption, slow, quiet, earned. Sometimes she cried when talking about the girl she used to be, sometimes I did too. Meanwhile, Meridian grew into a force of its own, Series B, new hires, a design studio buzzing with life, and investors who treated me as a leader, not a risk. Daniel stayed constant, grounding, never telling me to forgive, never pushing me to cut ties, just reminding me gently that healing doesn't need speed, only sincerity. When Business Insider finally ran their feature, Asterisk from You Don't Deserve Help to $80 million, how Marissa Hale built an empire without her family. Asterisk, I read my own quote at the end and felt my chest tight. Thank you for saying no, I had told the reporter. You showed me I couldn't depend on you, and because of that I became someone who didn't need to. It wasn't spite, it was truth. And truth had rebuilt my life more solidly than any apology ever could. 1 year after our IPO, on a quiet night under string lights and soft laughter drifting from the mansion windows, I sat in the shed with Daniel's arm around my shoulders as my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Thank you for dinner. We love you. I stared at the screen, typed I know, and set my phone down. Maybe one day I'd be able to say the words back, maybe not. Love doesn't always regrow where it once died. But trust earned slowly, steadily, honestly can. And as I leaned into the man who saw me long before my family ever did, listening to the gentle hum of voices from the home I built, I understood something I'd spent a lifetime chasing. Being seen is a gift, but being visible, truly visible, is a reckoning. And I was no longer afraid of being seen. If you connected with this story, or if it reminded you that you're stronger than the people who underestimated you, make sure you subscribe and let me know your thoughts in the comments. And before you go, tell me where you're watching from. I always love hearing your stories too.